All right, let's get the show on the road. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday, your weekly dose of all things Lord of the Rings. And that's Clifford Broadway, Quick Beam, if you know him best.
Well, hello everybody. This is the OneRing.net. And yes, this is our Torn Tuesday, and I'm laughing because there's so much going on and there's so much to talk about, and I don't even know where to begin. But it is delightful to have you all join us on our usual weekday jaunt. This is where we talk about The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, and what is my volume good? Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, we're here to talk about some really, really unique and interesting things that have been bubbling up on the web in the past 24 hours. Really wild, I mean, wild rumors, many of which we have verified. Stuff that has to do with season two of Amazon Prime Video's The Rings of Power, season two, which is coming up rather soon. And throughout tonight's broadcast, we're going to bring you as close as we can, a fair and open-handed analysis and conversation of some of these astounding, strange details that we've been hearing. The rumors will include us posting things that were on the internet on 4chan, got regurgitated onto our Discord, and then they vanished. So we're going to talk about the news. We're going to publish online on the main website an itemization of all the breaking news, and then we'll do some other analysis of that later on. So thank you again for joining us, everybody, for what is sure to be an intellectually rigorous conversation today. And I'm so grateful to be joined by many fine, fine feathered friends here in the YouTube chat. We are also on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and Discord, and Instagram, and so many other platforms. Great to have you all with us. We're on Twitch streaming as well. It is quite the conversation to have, and aren't we all lucky to be here? As Gandalf said, one of Gandalf's favorite phrases, it was actually Ian McKellen, and he said that on the red carpet arrival at the Return of the King world premiere. He said, "Aren't we lucky to be here?" The crowd went
I
wild.
am
It was
sorry.
great.
I missed everything that you just said to open the show, and I don't even
And
know if
that's
my
okay.
mic was working. Um, but I caught the very tail end that I caught the word 4chan, and I just want to say right now that was a phone call from senior management at the OneRing.net, and
Excellent.
we are going to ask for official comment.
Yep.
So
Okay, so
uh,
before we discuss all that stuff, and I
we're
just
not
said there's
going to discuss
explosive
it.
rumors.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I said before we discuss the explosive rumors. We're gonna have to, figure it out. But yes,
so yeah, so we have got we've been telling you, Cliff, how many months now have I been saying that we're sitting on some crazy stuff and we were waiting for the strike to end and Emmy
yes,
season
oh
to
yes,
end. Well, the Emmys were last night. Emmy season
they
is
were.
over.
hmm
Everybody involved in
Indeed.
season 1 has been relieved of their protective talking NDAs. People are talking. There are podcasts happening with several other outlets for season 1. Nerd of the Rings is currently in New Zealand. Who knows what he's talking about and with whom? But we have been sitting on everything, and rather than piece this
Yes.
out, and like we're just gathering our thoughts on everything. So and it was just decided. You saw me on the phone right now. Um, we're gonna try to get comment out of this officially because the stuff we've been sitting on is so interesting and so deep
That's
when it
that's an
comes to
understatement.
narrative. It's
Yep,
not,
that's an understatement.
and it has nothing to do with casting announcements or anything. In fact, I don't think we have any actor related scoops. That has been the domain of Fellowship of Fans, and he's been doing a wonderful job telling
Yes.
everybody who's playing who and who's been cast and who hasn't been announced yet. And it's been so exciting. But we've got real deal narrative structure scoops and we need to ask. We need to get clarity. We need to get confirmation from Amazon, from other sources. We need to do our homework, dot our I's, cross our P's and Q's, X our T's. I don't know. Everything that we need to do. So
Yes.
hopefully by the end of this week, maybe by next Torn Tuesday, hopefully
Yes.
sooner, we will finally give you guys everything we've been promising. And Cliff,
I hope to deliver. I really hope to deliver because this is news that I don't want to sit on. I'd rather
well,
just talk about it and get it out in the open. But
I
of
do
course,
too. Cliff,
let's do it that way.
you and I have been talking for at least 6 months now. How much we've wanted to discuss some of these things and really get into the nitty gritty of,
Yes.
of book lore. And you know what? I can't
Oh,
even say
yes.
which book because that would be a spoiler for the spoilers. So,
Oh boy. Oh
um,
boy.
so
Oh boy.
we're
Well, that's
happy that
dropping a
you
huge
guys
hint, but okay, sure.
we're happy that you guys are here with us every week, keeping the flame alive. But we
Yes.
feel, you know, if this thing, if we get any confirmation of any part of this, look, the only thing I will say, the
We'll be
only
talking for
thing,
months and months and months. We will be talking about it for the rest of the year
I
if we
guess the
confirm this.
one thing, I
Yeah.
guess the one book, the one book that
Hmm.
was brought up on our Discord this weekend that we've never ever talked about, Cliff, and you've never ever brought that book out and showed it on screen, is the Book of Lost Tales.
Oh, it's right there. I've got part one and part two right there on the shelf.
Well, let's just leave it at that for now
Okay.
because
Okay. Okay.
that
Okay.
book might, well, it'll be interesting, and I can't wait to see everybody's comments and reaction, and we're gonna have such a wonderful thing. In the
Yeah, me
meantime,
too. I must say, let's put a button on that and say what is most exciting is talking with our intelligent and creative fans that are always such a robust part of our audience. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I am. But let's leave it at that. I'm looking forward to that.
100%, and
Yeah.
I think the fun of fandom is talking about things, and that's why our message boards and our chat rooms and our Discords and our Twitter feeds, all through the years, our Facebook comments, that's where the magic of fandom is. And when we don't have a lot to talk about, we don't have a lot to talk about. And I think fandom has the most fun when we get to talk about anything we've seen, anything we hear. And we've been doing this for 20 years. We were posting helicopter shots of Hobbiton before anybody knew about a sheep farm.
Yeah. Yes,
So,
indeed.
so
Yes,
that's
indeed.
interesting. But hey, look, we've got news to report on this week. This show is all about the weekly news for all things Tolkien. And Cliff, maybe we should start out the show because this is, I believe, the 4-year anniversary today as we speak of the passing of Christopher Tolkien.
Oh dear. Indeed. We lost your voice just now, Justin.
Well, I don't know what to say. I
Oh, you
mean,
just came back. Okay, your voice just came back just now. Okay.
um, I don't know what to
We
say.
we what did you just say? Because I lost your sentence just now.
I've got nothing. Like the impact of Christopher Tolkien's passing, I think is more than just the
Yes.
passing of a guard. There
Yes,
is there is
I would
so
say.
much more. Now that we were 4 years out from the day Christopher Tolkien passed, we are realizing just how much things have changed and are changing now that he's no longer head of the family. Cliff, can you talk a little bit about what has happened since Christopher passed?
It is worth mentioning, although it might be a minor detail, but I'd like to go for some accuracy here. It is something we need to remind the audience that Christopher Tolkien stepped down before he died. and he stepped away from his responsibilities and his uh, being the one person controlling and understanding everything about the estate and the decisions of copyright issues and licensing issues. And Christopher Tolkien stepped away from that. And not long after he stepped away from that position, unfortunately, he passed away. And there has to be a special word used in connection with Christopher. Um, it's called stewardship. Not only did Christopher work diligently to throughout his entire life, while his father was still alive, Christopher Tolkien worked tirelessly in concert with his father to understand and evaluate all of the many details in his literary creation. And when Tolkien did pass away in 1973, then it was up to somebody out of his four children. I believe it was Priscilla, John, Christopher, and forgive me, a fourth child. Forgive me, I would know that name, but my brain isn't working today. Now, nobody else in the family took that role as Christopher stepped up to plate in 73 after his father died, and the family made certain protective maneuvers to handle inquiry into licensing, to handle issues with the publications and the foreign editions from around the world. That's just day-to-day business. There was something much, much more that Christopher Tolkien would dive into, and that was scholarship. Of all the first wave of J.R.R. Tolkien scholars, Christopher Tolkien was the first of the first wave. He is the greatest of all Tolkien scholars, inarguably, and that's because he had intimate access to his father's brain and his thoughts and lived with him all of his life. And he knew things about the legendarium that might not have been completely written down in black and white. And so by taking on the stewardship of his father's manuscripts,
Well,
he was suddenly caught in a world of unpublished material, thoughts, sketches of notes, brief passages that may or may not be related to other versions of brief passages of very familiar characters. And it became a huge, huge organizational cataloging effort that could only have been done to a level of meticulous exactitude and to get it done right within the framework of his father's already existing creation. So when you think about the monumental effort that happened, and Christopher Tolkien was the one to do it, it involves rescue and preservation of documents that were fragile, thin, torn, falling apart. We're talking not like real physical conservation efforts the way a museum would do, as well as the intellectual rigor that it took to comb through all those old stories and manuscripts and cohesively find a way to publish posthumously the other great stories of the creation mythology of EA and what would become Arda, the planet upon which we find our many adventures of Middle-earth taking place. The cosmology, the history, the gods, the goddesses of the Valar, the untold stories that had been waiting and waiting and waiting. Professor Tolkien was never more heartbroken in his life than the fact that the Silmarillion was never published while he was alive. We know this, especially from reading Tolkien's letters. It was so heartbreaking that he ended up working on it when his father died, and Christopher managed to heal the broken heart of the man who had passed away. This is how we remember Christopher Tolkien. He healed his father's broken heart after he had already shed this mortal coil and had gone to green pastures beyond.
isn't it
And
true that
it's just amazing when you think about that.
that the Hobbit started as a bedside tale for Christopher specifically?
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Susan said it would be Michael. That's right. Susan, thank you. It was Michael. So it'd be The children were Christopher, Michael, John, and Priscilla. Those are the four children. That's great. Thank you for reminding me. Um, yes. And what was your question? I'm sorry, Justin.
Didn't The Hobbit
Oh,
start
yes.
as a bedside tale for Christopher specifically? So when you
Well,
say that
for
Christopher had an insight that not even the letters and the papers and the notes, he had the deepest insight, because all of this entire Middle Earth legendarium started
yes.
as bedside tales for Christopher specifically.
Yes. Well, I've always understood that the bedside story of The Hobbit was an entertainment for multiple children in the Tolkien household. It may be more accurate to say that Christopher was the one who responded the most. It's not to say that The Hobbit was just for Christopher's ears only. That's not accurate. It's probably more accurate to say that Christopher responded much more enthusiastically to his father's storytelling than anyone else. And he got involved. He got involved with his father's storytelling while his father was still alive and Christopher was off in the Royal Air Force. His father was writing him letters about, significant changes and characters' plot lines and some of the histories of these amazing characters in the Third Age of Middle Earth. It's just so cool. Um, Imagine having that kind of fruitful relationship with your dad, who is the most creative mind of any generation, and you get to be right there with him in the living room while he's creating the stories, and you get to be part of maybe this, maybe that hypothetical conversations with your dad. Imagine if you were just that lad, if I was Christopher the lad, and I was in the room having tea, and my dad is there sitting there folding the newspaper and talking and mumbling to himself about Erendil and something that's happening. Imagine being able to just speak up and say, "Well, Dad, what if this? What if that happened?" And then your dad sitting there, who's the creator of Middle Earth, can say, "Well, no, actually, the process of the story is going like this." Can you imagine being at the breakfast table for that or at the dinner table any night? Imagine. So it is it is to say that Christopher Tolkien served as the preeminent first of all great Tolkien scholars, but he was also the facilitator of helping his father produce work. And he was also the museum curator and the archivist, and took care of many delicate and precious manuscripts that would have been lost to history, lost to all of us, if it were not for the really specific efforts that Christopher made. And he didn't just do it willy-nilly. He did it with a deep, deep knowledge and a deep love and affection for what he was handling.
Well,
And he
hello
knew
to
the
the good
importance of what
folks
he was handling. So, I love my
of
favorite story
Corn.
about, and it's something of an apocryphal story. I don't know if it's really real, but that story of many, many filing boxes, legal long boxes of documents and parchments and manuscripts that were packed up and shoved inside a big old brown station wagon. And in the early 70s, it was Christopher who was driving down to the south of France to relocate all of his father's manuscripts, driving through the European countryside and getting to put those boxes in storage and then going through them and helping to create the Silmarillion after that.
Uh,
What a story.
Tolkien had four children, three sons. Christopher was the middle son. Why do you
That's
think
right.
Why do you think J.R.R. Tolkien um why Christopher? Why was Christopher the favored son? Why did Christopher take over? You would think the eldest John or the youngest Michael, but the middle child, the middle son, became the baton
Yeah.
carrier. Why
Carrying the
him
torch.
specifically?
Probably because while he was alive, Christopher was the one who responded the most enthusiastically to his father's work. I would venture that. That's what I
I,
would that's what I would offer.
I love doing this live, because the chat room is saying that Michael had Tom Bombadil doll.
Yep, that's right. Michael had the Tom Bombadil doll, and Daisy Kim is also correct in saying that it was John, the eldest, who was hearing the earliest versions of the Hobbit story. So yeah, but I would just venture that Priscilla, John, and Michael didn't take as much of a vibrant interest as Christopher did. And maybe it was just they were just simpatico. Maybe father and son were more simpatico for each other's mindset and creative endeavors. Maybe that's just instincts. Just the boy had instincts for it, and his father knew that and encouraged it. And maybe it was just Christopher wanted to be more involved,
Is
you know?
Christopher mostly just an editor when it comes to Middle Earth Legendarium, or did Christopher create, or did Christopher edit? Like how much of
Yes
the
and
published
yes.
works of Tolkien is J.R.R. Tolkien versus Christopher's additions?
Don't know that there are material additions. I don't have any evidence in any of the historical notes that Christopher felt obliged to make any revisions himself. In his job, it was to be a curator, to be the assembly man of this giant jigsaw puzzle. But but it's also true, and you know this is true in any publishing world, that the editor has profound influence on the final output and the final polish of what the material looks like.
But when it comes to Middle Earth, for Christopher, it wasn't an avenue of creation. It was an editorial career.
Yes,
He did write his own
correct.
books, but Christopher Tolkien's bread and butter, the thing he's most known for, and the thing he most championed, was not his own career, but it was editing the volumes of his father's works and notes. Daisy Kim in the chat room says Christopher spent some years at home with a tutor when he was younger because he had a heart condition. This might have
Hmm.
endeared Christopher to his father. You know, I'm sure parents can relate. Like if you have, if one of your children has a debilitating physical issue or health issue, it's not that they become your favorite, but you do pay more attention. And I wonder if Christopher got more attention, um, and bonded with his father because he was more present at home.
Um, I don't understand that Christopher Tolkien wrote any of his own books at all.
Okay,
I don't know. No.
so so
Mm-mm.
his life's work was championing the highest fidelity to his
Yes.
father's intentions,
Yes. Yes.
and that continued to evolve over Christopher's lifetime. I mean, he was in his 90s. I mean, this man spent his entire lifetime poring over his father's notes, opening new boxes, finding more notes, and then going
Yes.
back and re-editing those stories, a lot from the Silmarillion, into their own published novels, individual published novels, because he had found that many more notes.
Yes.
Uh,
Indeed. He is credited with the entire 12 volume History of Middle-earth series. All of that exists because of his years and years and years of tireless academic work in editing it. Um, and also, quick housekeeping note, he was the third of four children. He was the youngest son. He was not the middle son. He was the youngest son.
I thought Michael was
Okay.
the youngest. No.
Nope, he was the youngest son.
Interesting.
Okay.
Thank you,
Uh,
chat room. Tim Fisher in the chat room. Let me see if I can bring this up. Um, Arda reconstructed the creation of the published Silmarillion. This is a book by author Douglas Kane. Thank you, Tim Fisher, for bringing this up. Maybe I should replace pin on second screen. There you go. Look at this. Arda reconstructed the creation of the published Silmarillion. Is the author Douglas Kane reveals a tapestry woven by Christopher Tolkien from different portions of his father's work that is often quite mind-boggling, with inserts that seemed initially to have been editorial inventions, shown to have come from some remote portion of Tolkien's vast body of work. This is incredible, and I'm in awe right now of this
Hmm.
sentence, because I had the personal opinion, not based on anything, that Christopher was just making up his own stuff because he wanted to be a writer like his father, but his father had already created this well-known world, and it was kind of easier for Christopher to become a well-known author by just gliding on the success of his father. This book, you can it's available on Amazon right here. Hardcover's $85, paperback's $48. I wonder if there's an ebook version. Arda Reconstructed
Hmm. Yeah,
says,
look at that. He also makes a frank appraisal of the material omitted and invented by Christopher Tolkien and how these omissions and insertions may have distorted his father's vision of what he considered to be his most important work. Hmm.
I mean, what an
Hmm.
incredible book. If you want to know, I mean, the making of the Silmarillion, I'm sure is a tale to be told. The Silmarillion was the first book published after Tolkien's death. The Silmarillion took 5 years to put together. Tolkien died in 73. The Silmarillion was
Yes.
published in 78. Coincidentally, the same year that there was a major motion picture, Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, in theaters. So there's always been this wave, and Christopher Tolkien has first and foremost always put his father first. Cliff, I want to talk a little bit about, again, today on the anniversary of Christopher's death in 2020. Who knew that we would lose so many people in 2020 at the start, during the hardest year of the pandemic. My heart is with everybody here in the chat room that lost someone that year as well.
Yes.
But Christopher, um, he held an iron fist on control of the estate and the creative output for anything Lord of the Rings. I think many fans have debated whether that was good or bad. Christopher notoriously hated Peter Jackson's movies. I believe that Christopher did not appreciate any adaptations, because Christopher was, as a business-minded person, he was
Mm-hmm.
one of the first to point out to his father
Mm-hmm.
that he had signed a bad deal when
Ah,
Tolkien sold the
yeah.
movie rights to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings in 1968. The clause in perpetuity meant that the family would never, ever get those rights back. And Christopher was frustrated with that term. J.R.R. Tolkien later regretted, and it's in his letters, Tolkien regretted signing that deal because of his naivety
Yes.
over what that truly meant. So, if Christopher's career starts out with this opinion of bad deal making, you start to understand why Christopher didn't let anyone else play in the sandbox.
Yeah, of course. Yes. I get that totally.
Do
That
you
makes
think
sense.
did he ever come around to appreciating the movies for what they were?
No,
Hmm.
not that has ever seen print. He was notoriously reclusive, and the fact that one French newspaper got an interview with him became the most famous standout conversation piece. Finally, the scion of Tolkien speaks up and says how much he doesn't like the movies. That was just a moment in time. And honestly, Christopher Tolkien was not inclined to give interviews, so we don't have any other softened opinion that happened later on.
The other thing
Sorry.
I think we should point out is Christopher didn't like the movies, but that is not true with the rest of the Tolkien family. In fact, Roy Tolkien can be seen in a couple of the Lord of the Rings movies. And
Yes.
Simon Tolkien, Christopher's son, really loved movie making and
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed Peter Jackson's
Oh,
movies
yes.
intensely. And
Yep.
Simon Tolkien tried to be involved in the Lord of the Rings and then the Hobbit movies. I mean, Simon wanted to be a part of this uh, new media adventure adaptation. So, uh, so I guess my question to you, Cliff, is by if Christopher the man just didn't like movies,
Mm-hmm.
is it fair that his opinion on Peter Jackson's movies, is it fair that his opinion represented the opinion of the entire estate?
Mm. Do you know, it's always been hard to parse out the difference between who in the estate has the dominant opinion and who has other various dissenting opinions. That's always been very, very hard to evaluate and understand
Hmm.
until now. I think now we have a bit more of an insight on it. At this point, from what we understand, the Tolkien estate is not handled by uh, Christopher Tolkien's widow, Bailey. Okay. Um,
No, everything we've heard is the
well,
estate.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, everything that we've heard in the last 3 years is that when upon Christopher's passing, majority control of the output of the estate has been put in control of by Simon Tolkien, Christopher's direct son.
Indeed.
So, but back to Christopher's opinion on Peter Jackson movies. Obviously, the rest of the family did not agree with uh, Christopher's opinion of hating Peter Jackson's movies. So,
Mhm.
is it fair that his Christopher's personal opinion should represent the entire Tolkien estate's opinion on those adaptations?
Yeah, I think it's fair because if John, Michael, and Priscilla didn't want to participate and didn't have, anything much to offer, then why not? Why not just have the autonomy go into that quadrant of the family, and it would be a quadrant. Why not just have that quadrant of the family that is most invested in it and has worked the most on it be the one that has the control over the estate? It does make the most sense to me, really. I mean,
But in sharing his opinion of the movies, it doesn't represent the entire family.
no.
But it
And
carries an additional, but it carries the official weight of the estate because Christopher was in
yes,
charge of the estate.
of the literary estate. Yes.
Right.
And there was so much effort being made at that time so that Christopher's work would land his father on the side of literary accreditation and literary placement in regard. There was no room in this conversation for popular culture. There was no room for the animated films or the live action films. That wasn't what Christopher was working towards. And he had a great deal of alarm in thinking that there would be diminishment of his father's academic legacy because of the films.
Fair. Uh so
Yeah. So,
so the head of the estate when it comes to creative output, his opinions and his creative endeavors carry the weight of the entire family. Basically,
yes,
the output of the head of
yes.
the estate
Mhm.
represents the entire estate.
Yes. And what we understand now, um, although Bailey, the widow of Christopher Tolkien, is still alive, she stepped aside from any familial controlling interest in the estate's concerns, and it went to Christopher's son,
Simon. And
Simon. That's
and
right.
and and we did a show about Simon Tolkien a couple weeks ago, and I highly
That's
recommend going to
correct.
our YouTube page and
Yes.
watching the Simon Tolkien episode, because it is
Mm-hmm.
illuminating into
Mm-hmm.
the
It is.
man, his history with the family, his relationship with the work of his grandfather, and the interpersonal politics that got between him and his dad,
Yeah.
Christopher. They
Well,
did patch things up by the end, but
yeah.
Cecilia in the chat
Yeah.
room says the personal opinion of one family member should not be taken as the opinion of the rest of the family. But that's not what happened, Cliff. When Christopher said the movies are trash, it was taken as the opinion of the estate.
That's fine. Yes, that would be fine because at that time the estate was run and all of its interests were directed by Christopher. Keep in mind, Justin, and to my dear audience, when the boy was only 21 years old, Christopher Tolkien was invited by his dad to go to the Eagle and Child and join the Inklings. He was the youngest writer, editor, the youngest person to ever be included in that discussion group with C.S. Lewis and Charles Williams and Tolkien himself and Owen Barfield. They were all together in the Inklings. Who was that young kid who just came to the table? Well, it wasn't John or Michael or Priscilla. It was Christopher who joined the Inklings when he was 21. And he was the guy who cared. Christopher Tolkien was the guy who cared the most. He was the one who earned, I think, that kind of unilateral voice. I think he earned it.
Okay.
And
You,
that's
you
just my opinion. My
Cliff,
opinion. Yeah.
you've been a co-author on several books on J.R.R. Tolkien, The People's Guide to J.R. You wrote and produced Ringer's Lord of the Fans, and you documented the history of Lord of the Rings
Mm,
fandom. Was
yes.
there ever a time when fandom questioned Christopher Tolkien's output when it comes to the Middle Earth Legendarium? Was there ever a time where fandom was like, you're not your father, and this stuff is not canon?
No, no, not that I've heard of. And I've known a lot of people in the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. I've known a lot of people in different Tolkien groups and smiles around the country. No, no, I don't think that's no. You look, this little book that you pointed out about Arda Reconstructed is probably the only time that, and I just took a very quick look at some of the reviews. They're a very small, minute group of people who appeared sometime in the 80s and 90s who were critical of Christopher's hardcore approach to this. And no, that is the super minority voice. If you got to come with an axe to grind against Christopher Tolkien, and the way that he worked on his father's material. Douglas Kane, that guy who wrote Arda Reconstructed, is one of those few voices that's out there actually, making a stink about it. Um, there are, there's a lot of dynamic
Recording
approaches.
in progress.
Got it. Um, there's a lot of what I would call unique and dynamic opinions in the world of Tolkien scholarship, but there's really not a fair and trouble-free critical analysis. Um, if you're trying to critically analyze Christopher Tolkien's work as if you were to suggest that he unilaterally went too far in doing editing and changes of his father's material, no, I mean, that is the tiniest little minority voice in all of Tolkien scholarship that wants to complain about what Christopher did. And it's a very narrow viewpoint that I think is offered in Mr. Douglas Kane's book. It was my opinion, but I think it's a rather narrow and kind of shifty analysis about what is critically negative about what Christopher did. To me, there's nothing but positive response to the fact that Christopher bothered. If nobody else had bothered the way that Christopher did, then we would never, ever have had a Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales or the Book of Lost Tales or any of the other wonderful, wonderful volumes that are included in that series. So no, Justin, there's room. There's always room for a different view and another contrasting point of view, but that is a tiny and not very vocal minority of Tolkien scholarship that takes any issue with what Christopher ever created. Very, very small minority. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why it hasn't been like a huge wave of let's all scratch all this and take a look at the manuscripts and see if we can put the Silmarillion together better. No, that doesn't happen. You don't have people in the fandom pushing to undo the amazing editorial work that Christopher did. In fact, it's about as blanket, a blanket of approval that you're ever going to get when you talk to general people in Tolkien scholarship about Christopher's efforts and his great accomplishments. Because, as I've said before, we are the beneficiaries of all of his years and years of insane, tireless academic work. We're the beneficiaries of that. So only the tiniest little minority of people in scholarship want to take a hot poker and start burning things out of Christopher's work. His body of work stands as, the greatest love letter to his father's creative mind that exists anywhere. So there you
Fair.
go.
Chat room comments say it was Christopher's life's work. He wasn't writing his dad's coattails. Daisy Kim says, think of what could have been lost without Christopher's work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
that we've
Yes.
established,
Cheers to that. So, but hey, cheers to Christopher Tolkien and to the great adventures beyond this world. To you, sir. And I say thank you for everything.
thank you, Christopher, as his final act
Hmm.
of his illustrious lifetime, where Christopher did not do anything he didn't want to do. He took his methodical time with every piece of fiction, literature, biography, output, novel. Christopher made sure it was exactly as the estate wanted to output.
Yes. Yes.
To that end, his final act as acting head of the Tolkien estate was to make the deal with Amazon Studios. His final act before he relinquished control of the estate.
Are we sure of that? Are we sure that it wasn't the first act of his son Simon?
They put the feelers out. They put the negotiation feelers out early in the year as his last act. And from what we've been able to piece together from NPR and the Wall Street Journal and certain biographies, it was this last act of doing a TV deal that was Christopher's gift to the rest of the family. As we just talked about, Christopher, he didn't like Peter Jackson's movies, whereas most of the family did like the movies, and movies in general. So his final act as head of the estate was to do the TV deal, which ended up going to Amazon. And since then, we have confirmed that Simon Tolkien is the acting head of the Tolkien estate when it comes to matters of the television show. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on our Simon Tolkien
Yes.
episode. It was written in the
That
Wall
wasn't,
Street Journal.
that was eye-opening, and I learned something in that conversation. Yes.
So, is it our duty as fans to give as much respect and deference to the creative output of the current head of the Tolkien estate as we did Christopher Tolkien and
Not
his output?
necessarily. Not necessarily. And I'll tell you why. Just because I like talking like Benny Hill and I like making that joke. Not necessarily. I always love that joke. But hey, I was raised on Benny Hill. Um, for better or for worse, informed my weird sense of humor. But no, because Simon Tolkien did not spend a dedicated academic life behind closed, academic doors, sitting at a desk, working his ass off to go through. Simon did not go through all of his grandfather's papers and by osmosis and through a lifetime of hardcore work get that deep into it. Uh,
But his dad
I,
did. Doesn't Simon benefit, as we all did, from his dad's detailed research project? I mean, what's the point of redoing what your dad just did?
no, I didn't say he needed to redo it. I'm
Okay.
just saying he doesn't automatically get a free card of respect because he didn't do those things that his father did. He's just a nepo baby in that position, for lack of a better term.
What? Come on.
He is just a nepo baby.
The
In
family has
sorry,
anointed
but
the family who has carefully considered every
sorry.
output, everything to do with J.R.R. Tolkien's legacy and estate, carefully considered. Every documentary they've been in, every TV hit that they were on the BBC, every biography, everything has been carefully considered. Even Priscilla's arrangement and involvement with the Tolkien Society, carefully orchestrated. Don't you think equally a careful decision was made with Christopher still alive to put Simon in control of the creative output of the estate? Don't you think that was as carefully measured a decision?
That's just as likely as anything, but I really don't know.
Hmm.
That's just as likely as anything, but we really don't know for sure. What I still stand on is an academic fact. Simon Tolkien has not stepped a toe into the waters that Christopher was up to his neck in the waters of scholarship and deeper understanding of his father's work. And Simon hasn't stuck a toe in that creek, much less gone swimming into the deeper currents. So he doesn't automatically get a free validation of, wow, you're the smartest person in the room to make these decisions about the estate right now. That's not automatic just because of a genetic windfall of being born by happy accident into the Tolkien family.
Okay,
You
well,
know,
let me push back. Then why did Christopher get a free pass?
because Christopher dedicated, as we've said many, many, many times, and as you know already before I say it,
But you
Christopher
see,
dedicated blood and sweat and tears and countless, countless years to literally aggressively get involved and deeply enmeshed into the DNA of the storytelling while his father was in the process of making it happen.
so
Simon was never
nobody
there for
ever
that.
questions. So you said nobody ever questioned Christopher's uh, validation and quality of work, even when the Silmarillion was published 5 years after his dad's death. There was no backlash of like, oh, you're just milking your father's estate at this point, 5 years after his death. Why was
No, it was
Christopher always? We just talked about why Christopher was always celebrated. Why shouldn't we give the same allowance to the entire family? And now the head of the family, Simon Tolkien, or the head of the creative
because
output.
Well, it was 4 years, okay, not five. And the the answer is as obvious as that beautiful little button nose you have on your face, Justin. The answer is clear because you don't give autonomy and control to a person. I mean, the fact that Christopher published what he published became the evidence that his work was sound. The very existence of it was the most seismic experience that's ever happened, ever, in Tolkien's literary legacy. And it happened 4 years after he was dead. It was the publication of the Silmarillion. And just the very fact that it existed in what is, difficult as it might be, it's still digestible, consumable, understandable, and has brought the world deeper, deeper, deeper into a much more complex and comprehensive understanding of all of the fictional world of Arda. I mean, and look at the way the chat is giving you these responses.
I'm
I
reading
mean,
them.
I'm telling you, you don't
Okay,
need me to
okay.
tell
Well,
you.
all right. Let me
Isn't it just as
rephrase the
likely that
concept. Let me
that
rephrase the
Simon just got the
concept.
position because of seniority? Christopher died. Simon was the oldest son. That's it. That's what was in the will. Now he's in charge. That does
So
not
I
reflect
will push.
academic experience. It's just a fact of you were born at the right time, therefore you're the eldest son.
Why?
That's just
Why?
hierarchy of
This sounds like Succession. I am the eldest boy.
it
Are you
does.
are you are
Yes,
you
I'm the
are you
eldest. It
calling
does.
Simon Tolkien
It does sound like
the,
that.
the, the Succession son? I am the eldest son.
Oh my
Wait,
gosh, you're
but
so funny.
if
You're
if
so funny.
if Christopher was the middle son or the youngest son, I forget. If Christopher was not seniority in the
Hmm.
birth order, why did he get to take over the estate? And why do you think that Christopher would not be as equally uh intelligent about this decision as he was when he did took over when his father died? Why do you think why Cliff do you think that the rules changed and it's not about quality of your work and your character, but just seniority in birth order? Why would they change? Christopher would not do a willy-nilly thing like that. He was too careful and he was too measured. He never did anything that wasn't carefully considered. Why do you think this would be? Why do you think this wouldn't be carefully considered?
You know what? I wasn't in the room, but I feel that historically the circumstances happened with Christopher stepping down. He knew he didn't have much time left, and he just wanted to let it go and die in peace.
And as we talked about a couple weeks ago on our Simon Tolkien episode, Simon really wanted to be involved in the Peter Jackson films. The studio pushed him away. Simon
Hmm.
asked his father Christopher to
Yes,
flex, to
that's
put a
true.
little pressure, as only the
That's true.
Tolkien estate could, to
Yep.
make him a producer on those films, make him involved. And New
Yep.
Line pushed back and said no way. And Christopher hated the films anyway. Christopher hated the idea of Hollywood because they had cut his dad a bad deal. So as his final act in his life, he knows his son, his eldest son, his only son, wants to be a movie producer. So as one of his final acts in life, he does a deal with Amazon and ensures in contract form that his son will be making TV shows. It's his final gift to his son. But that's a gift. Why shouldn't we I feel like we as fans owe Simon a little bit of latitude to make his own mark. just as Christopher, his dad, made his own mark. But based on this book that the chat room brought up, Christopher may have not made his own mark, because a lot of the things added to the Silmarillion were eventually found as factual notes of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Justin, you keep referring back to this book. It's not the goddamned Bible, and it's not the last word on the scholarship. What you've just picked out and what other people have mentioned in the chat, this particular book, Arda Reconstructed, is sort of looked at with, okay, this is an interesting piece of scholarship, but it is not universally embraced.
Okay, fair.
It's not embraced by all scholarship. It has a very narrow and limited analysis of its point of view. And, you know, you're in real dangerous water when you're trying to do an academic takedown of Christopher Tolkien. You're in really dangerous water. You really are.
All right, fair.
All right. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: in your research, again with the documentary, with studying fans all these decades, did Christopher make every effort to not create on his own? Did Christopher actually try to base everything he ever output on something his dad noted?
He did some other editorial work on other books, including some other ancient Greek. He did some other.
Sure, outside, but I'm talking inside the Middle Earth Legendarium.
No,
Christopher did not try to create.
No, he didn't. He didn't try to create within that world. He edited outside of his father's works. It says right here he edited some Geoffrey Chaucer. And he also did his father's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which we saw as that remarkable, interesting film last year, The Green Knight. Yes. So yeah, no, he did not insert himself into his father's world or write things. If there was transitional words that needed to be made to make a sentence read like a sentence, then maybe that happened. Look, I mean, imagine looking at scribbled notes that were written upwise and downwise on the sides and margins of flimsy, falling apart parchment. And it's that spidery, thin handwriting that Tolkien was so famous for. Who else could do it? Who could read it and understand it? Except that young man had been reading his father's weird handwriting all of his life. Who else could have done what he did? Christopher Tolkien had the knowledge, the presence of history with his father during the creative process. He had academic access to the paperwork. He drew the maps. He drew the bloody maps for these major editions of The Lord of the Rings that we all look at and love. And his initials are on those maps. I've got one right here. I mean, this is like, the man was a scholar,
much different.
and he was so deep into the DNA of his father's work, while Simon was not. Doesn't that kind of answer itself about who gets the most credit and who doesn't for being the one largely responsible for the intellectual destination of how the legacy is handled and looked at by the world? It makes entirely great sense to me, without question, that Christopher Tolkien was the one who did that work and gave us the damn legacy that we have. There would be no conversation about, is Sauron a Maiar or a Valar? We wouldn't even be talking about that. We would have no concept of these things, or the darkening of the two trees. We wouldn't have been jumping out of our seats looking at J.A. Bayona giving us a beautiful image of the two trees, except for the fact that Christopher Tolkien worked his ass off to make that material available to us. There you go. That's my opinion.
What does Simon Tolkien need to do to earn the trust?
Better question. That's a better question. That's a better question.
To his father, Christopher. You've done a great job explaining why Christopher earned that reputation. So what, now that Simon's in control, what does Simon need to do to earn that? Because Christopher has already
Good
mined
question.
all of the notes. Christopher has
Yep.
done all of the scholarship work.
Yep.
Shouldn't this be the era where Christopher's family and Christopher's son can now build upon the foundations of Christopher's work and expand creatively?
Could have been. Could have been. But the last two J.R.R. Tolkien books that we got were edited by Carl Hostetter and edited by Brian Sibley, two other people who are way, way respected and established in real world Tolkien scholarship and have been for decades. Simon had a chance, but he didn't get into it, did he? He could have gotten into it, but he didn't. It was up to Carl Hostetter and Brian Sibley. And they're very different people. Carl and Brian are very, very different people. They have different backgrounds, different politics, different attitudes about the world, but they're both universally embraced for their scholarship. When has Simon Tolkien written anything for the Malorn publication, for the Tolkien Society? When has Simon Tolkien written scholarship papers that have been submitted and vetted by other scholars and put into circulation as part of Tolkien Society conversation, or the actual printed materials that continue to be published as real modern day scholarship? I'd like someone to point me to that. Please, someone in the chat room, point me to the last time Simon Tolkien had appeared at Oxenmoot and had been a speaker at Oxenmoot. I've been. Even me, this guy who did a little Ringers documentary and writes for a fan website. Even me, I got invited to Oxenmoot. When was Simon there? I mean, look, everybody went to go and have tea with Priscilla. Back 20 years ago, 18 years ago, one of the most beautiful highlights of going to Oxford and being part of the Oxenmoot Academic Conference was that there was a breakfast and luncheon, I think, kind of thing with Priscilla, where she opened up her doors and was welcome to greet other scholars and people in the Tolkien Society, a limited group at a time. You know what? When was Simon doing that? Do you see the connections I'm making? There is an instant causality between what you contribute to existing scholarship, which has gone on for years and years and years and decades after Tolkien has died, versus not contributing at all. And the more you contribute, I know this for sure, this is also true, the more you contribute, the more people know who you are and will come to you for your opinion and for your scholarship and for your academic grace. And I'd like to see Simon's academic grace being given at some point. If it happened like that, then we might have had someone like Simon Tolkien and Brian Sibley working together on, The Fall of Numenor. That book might have had Simon's name on it, but he
Why?
hasn't been
Why
contributing. He
then?
has
Why?
not been contributing. So,
Well, I
so
would argue that Simon Tolkien has contributed $1 billion worth of new material by being in the room for the
mm,
Rings of Power season 1 and season 2. Why is his contribution? Why is Simon's contribution through the medium of television any less noble than going to some conference or writing a book?
let me see. I don't know. I was just looking at the question that Otaku Senpai had asked in the chat. Did Professor Tolkien officially designate Christopher as his literary executor? And I believe the answer is yes, but I'm looking for the proof. I'm looking for the proof of where that
Fair,
is, but yeah,
fair.
I do believe
Well,
that's
all
I
right.
do believe that that's true. Yes.
Well, I think this is an ongoing conversation. I think we should do a little more
Mm,
research, a little more homework. Maybe we should post an
yeah.
article about this, because I feel like this is a subject that we need as fans to wrap our head around, because uh because Simon is currently in control of the creative output of the Tolkien estate. He obviously doesn't want to write books, and they've handed that off to Brian Sibley, Carl Hostetter, and whatever writers. Um, but Simon wants to be in control of the output of the estate when it comes to television, and that's why there is a deal with Amazon. So I don't know. I
Uh,
like
okay, I
you
have the
have all
answer for
this.
you. Hold on.
Okay,
I've got the answer now. Here it is. Otaku Senpai, and for everybody in the chat, okay, the very first person who was the legal executor of the estate proper, the sole literary executor, was originally J.R.R. Tolkien's lawyer Frank Williamson. Okay? And it says here the executors of the estate proper were Christopher Tolkien, who was the sole literary executor, uh, and Kathleen Blackburn and Meyer Blackburn, who has been the estate's solicitor for many years. So they're the solicitors. But it does say that he succeeded. Christopher Tolkien was the sole literary executor, and he succeeded Tolkien's lawyer, Frank Williamson. So there's your answer. Okay,
and then Christopher
got that.
handed it off to Simon.
Okay, and I'm glad I found it. Just took a little Wikipedia, a quick second. Um, and that chain of command is interesting. Okay, it's good to know these details. But yeah, I'm always here to celebrate um Christopher's birthday. And if you would, Justin, you can pull up my Twitter feed because my pinned tweet at the very top of my profile is we have lost the greatest mind of Tolkien scholarship in our or any generation. And it was my personal tribute, a thread to Christopher Tolkien. It's all right there. Um, I think yeah, there's just a lot that Simon could have done to make himself present at Oxenmoot or at fan conventions or at, actual academic conventions, because there's more than just the Oxenmoot that happens in London and excuse me, in
Okay, all
Oxford.
right,
There's more than
fair,
just that one.
fair,
So
all right, fair. I think
he didn't
I get
participate.
what you're saying.
Huh.
This is going to be an ongoing conversation because the Simon's not going away. But so
Okay.
this has been enlightening, and so we pay tribute to Christopher, who spent his life in tribute to his father, J.R.R. Tolkien, and who died this day in 2020, just 4 short years ago. Um, an incredible earned reputation through nothing but scholarship. And the vibe I'm getting from Cliff here is we fans value scholarship as much as anything, and maybe even more than anything. You know, being a part of the community is being a
Yeah.
part of the scholarship of
Yeah,
Middle
very
Earth.
much so. Very much. I mean, there are there are people that I would sit down with here in Los Angeles in Griffith Park when we have our big birthday picnic for Bilbo. And I'm sitting out there in the park having a picnic with this person, and within 18 months, he has written the most amazing article that is published by the Tolkien Society and is being lauded as this amazing new piece of scholarship. These people are real and they live around us. They're all around us. And they're not just fans. These are people who contribute a great deal. They study their lives. They work on studying to get a PhD in Tolkien studies. They write their dissertations. And yeah, there are people who really do contribute. And I would agree with that assessment. Um, and that's so funny. Monica says, "Boy, when Cliff gets heated, his inner truck driver comes out." Well, that's funny. Okay, LOL. I'll take that. That's
I
funny.
will say
I
Daisy
did.
Kim says J.R.R. Tolkien was a
That's funny.
professor at Oxford. Scholarship is part of the deal here. And
Mm,
I agree. Speaking of scholarship, we got to move
yeah.
on because we got a few news stories to get through. This is big news. Um, Queen of the Rings. Speaking of scholars, John Garth is one of the most celebrated, sometimes controversial, but celebrated scholars on J.R.R. Tolkien. And today, recently, he published an article about Denmark's recent queen who abdicated her throne on New Year's Day. Queen Margaret
Yes.
of Denmark, the first Danish monarch to abdicate the throne in 900 years. Cliff, why does she have a connection to Lord of the Rings?
Because of her wonderful illustrations. She did these great illustrations for when she was just a little girl, and Tolkien loved them. And they were sent to him, and he never wrote her back, but uh, they found later on some really favorable comments, really favorable notes that he had written because he loved her illustrations. And then she ended up using her artistic talent to become an illustrator for the publications of The Hobbit. It
The
was so
Danish
great.
editions.
Yes. If not,
And
if not others.
and because she was the queen, Margaret, she used a pseudonym to keep her royal identity apart from the legacy of Tolkien.
She she did. She did use a pseudonym. That's right. Yes.
Well,
And
in John Garth's
what's
new article,
yeah, tell us.
he explains that Lord of the Rings was her favorite book of all time of her life, and their correspondence might have continued, but she became queen in January 72, and Tolkien
Mm.
died in September 73.
Mm-hmm.
It was only in 1977 that Queen Margaret allowed her previous illustrations to be used in a Folio Society edition. In this book, to which Queen Margaret is devoted, the highest virtue is to relinquish power.
Mm.
Those defending freedom and peace against the
Mm-hmm.
demonic tyrant Sauron refuse to use his own ring of power to defeat him. Instead, they destroy it, relinquishing the chance to be masters of Middle-earth themselves. Cliff, do you agree that one of the core themes of Lord of the Rings is the relinquishment of power?
Yep. Absolutely. Of course.
So
Of
does
course it
this
is.
so does this make sense why Queen Margaret, an ultimate Lord of the Rings fan, would be the first queen in 900 years to abdicate the throne?
I love it. I love that she did it, and I love that she did it symbolically and also to speak towards the condition of the earth that we're in right now. I think that's really cool, actually. It's really cool, actually, when you
It
think about that.
is a one, and that's what we talk about when we talk about scholarship for Tolkien. I mean, there is a direct line between the actions of a head of state and their love for Tolkien. And that is something that we've been talking about for several months now, because there is currently a Tolkien exhibition in Italy, in Rome, put on by the head of state, the Prime Minister of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So, man,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Well, we have had a lot of problems in this country, obviously, with people clinging to power when they should not, and causing a lot of trouble when they should allow the peaceful transfer of power the way it's supposed to work. I mean, reminder, we are a constitutional republic here in the United States, and that's how it's supposed to work. So I think as a really profound gesture, she hit the mark. Really.
Very good. Moving on.
Very good.
Huge news. The Rings of Power TV show loses yet another key member of the production.
Oh, really?
Producer Ron Ames was one of the most featured producers on the first announcement for Rings of Power. You guys remember that video where they announced J.A. Bayona, all these producers. They announced Tom Shippey and John Howe. And
Yes. Yes.
and then half of those people left before the show even started filming. Well, another producer of Rings of Power has left the show. Ron Ames have moved over to one of the visual effects houses that worked on Rings of Power. Ron
Oh,
Ames was responsible for over 9,000 visual effects shots for season 1 of The Rings of Power. And now that producer of Rings of Power is now leaving the show and being hired full time as an
wow.
in-house producer at the VFX house that
Oh,
worked
wow.
on Rings of Power. So that's kind of huge news. Um, Other news for Rings of Power. I wanted to bring this up
Hmm.
because a lot of fans have been asking, will Rings of Power get canceled if season 2 doesn't live up? Well, here we are, December 2022, 13 months ago. 13 months ago, the head of Amazon Studios, Vernon Sanders,
Hmm.
I just want to say this again, the head of Amazon Studios, Vernon Sanders, in an article with Deadline, specifically says that season 3 was already committed. He says, we are absolutely committed. We have every reason to be excited. They've done a tremendous job. It's a great question about season 3. As of December 2022, there were probably 2 to 3 months in on season 3. So a
What
year
you mean?
ago,
You mean in terms of pre-production? You mean?
correct, in terms of
Okay.
planning
Okay.
and pre-production on season 3. So
Okay.
as of a year ago, they were already 2 months into the planning of season 3.
Wow.
Season 3 has already been given the green light. So I'm pretty sure that no matter what happens with season 2, we're going to get a season 3, and they're already working toward that. Um, Another update.
Maybe the question should be revised. Will this 5 season effort stop at the end of season 3? Just in case they don't, what if they don't hit their marks, or maybe they don't get the numbers they want, or maybe things just go south? Who knows? Could be any number of things that could happen. But that would be interesting if they stop at 3 out of 5. And I'm immediately brought to mind of the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because Warner Brothers Discovery did a 5 picture deal with J.K. Rowling for expanding the wizarding world. You know what they did? They stopped at 3, and Warner Brothers is not committed anymore to doing movie 4 or movie 5, and that's the end of that series. So it has happened. It has happened to a large scale, expensive fantasy IP where they say they're going to do 5 and they stop at 3. So you never know. You never know. You never know.
Speaking of people that have left the production, again,
Hmm.
recently, last week, Rings of Power was nominated for Best Fantasy Costumes. The costume designer for Rings of Power was nominated for an Emmy Award. Unfortunately, it lost, I believe, to House of the Dragon, but maybe it lost to The Last of Us.
Right.
Rings of Power was nominated for Best Costumes for season 1 for an Emmy Award. Amazon did not rehire that costume designer. Even after getting an Emmy nomination, season 2 does not have the same costume designer. We can officially confirm that the new costume designer for Rings of Power season 2
Ooh.
is
Okay.
men's attire legend Luca Mosca. He has tailored suits for Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman. He dressed The Rock, and he has worked
He is a
on
costume
many
designer.
movies. But the number one movie that he is most famous for
Is John Wick 2?
is John Wick. Yes, the
Yep.
impeccably tailored suits
Impeccable.
of the
Impeccable.
entire John
Yep.
Wick series.
Yep. That's
That
him.
is the costume designer for
Yep.
Rings of Power Season 2. Cliff, what does this
Wow.
tell you about where the design of Rings of Power characters are headed?
Uh, Well,
A
he
more
also did a movie called he did a little movie called The Last Witch Hunter, and I think that's the closest he's come to. And that was that big
that was
bomb of a movie that
Elijah Wood,
Vin
right?
Diesel.
And
That
Vin
was Vin
Diesel.
Diesel. You know,
Yeah.
Elijah's in that, yeah. But that's the closest I think he's coming
But
to doing a
does this
fantasy
mean
action movie.
does this mean that Lord of the Rings of Power is headed toward a more masculine wardrobe style?
No, no, no. Every wardrobe designer and every costume designer on every film is asked to do wild variations based upon the actual project itself. So it's perhaps more accurate to say that this guy, his name's Luca, right?
Yes.
He has a very big job in front of him because he's going to have to wildly differentiate from the types of things he's used to doing.
I
He's
don't
used to
think so
doing all these
because
John Wick movies.
all of
Yeah,
his movies have been alpha male, like you said, Vin
ac-
Diesel, The Rock, Harrison Ford, John Wick.
yep,
These are all alpha male
action
personas,
movies.
well-dressed men in
Hmm.
action movies. They are all
Right.
well-dressed men. So,
Yes.
what do you like? Will this have an impact to what we're used to seeing?
Who knows? It just seems like it's a bit of a challenge. Maybe because he's just been in that particular wheelhouse doing those particular movies for so long. It's just going to be a big expansion of his repertoire, and it's going to be an instant challenge. Just add water, instant challenge, and you have it. He's going to have to meet up with Kate Hawley's fantastic costumes that she's already done
Kate
and was
Hawley, of
nominated
course, worked
for.
on Peter Jackson's movies as well. That's what I'm saying. Like this is
Well,
a
yeah,
huge,
yeah,
huge difference in the
it is.
core styling. Kristen
Yes.
Streck in the chat room, Cliff wants to know: does this mean we'll see suits tailored like Thranduil had?
Hmm.
I feel
You
like
know what? They did.
Thranduil was well dressed, but it had a feminine flair.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, they certainly did give Lee Pace the best tailored looks of anybody in the history of Peter Jackson's entire six film oeuvre. Lee Pace got the winning hand out of that. That's true. It's
All
just
right.
a fact. It's a fact.
Well, so that's a big news. My take on my take on this situation is
Hmm.
we have been fortunate enough to get the best of New Zealand's best. And when they moved production to
Yes.
the UK, of course, they have replaced everybody. And
Yes.
I think this is a sign by hiring the costume designer of John Wick. I have a feeling that this is a sign that the show itself is going more masculine. I mean, the biggest shows on
Why,
Amazon Prime are Jack Reacher
why would you infer that? Why would you infer that?
because this costume designer has only done male-oriented action movies. That's all he's done. That's what he's known for. That's what he's best at. And John
But
Wick
that's
just
not what he
happens
was
to be the
hired
biggest
for.
franchise. He's
He's
hired to
now
do,
being hired to make armor for Numenor and cavalry and
but that's what I'm saying.
sailors on
The
Numenorian boats and Southlanders who've got nothing but dirt under their fingernails and nothing to wear.
the Southlanders have been
That's his
replaced
job
by
now.
orcs. I predict that the
Oh,
Southlanders are irrelevant going forward. I feel like
they're
this
just relocated. The ones who survived are now relocated outside of Mordor. That's
and
all.
irrelevant to the story. I have a feeling that uh, this hiring of a John Wick costume
Sure.
designer is a sign that Amazon Studios is like, we are a male oriented channel with Jack Ryan and Jack Reacher and the boys and the NFL and all
And
of
the
these.
marvelous Mrs. Maisel
That's
and
canceled. It's over.
and
Keep going.
what's the big side movie from Invincible? It's Adam Eve following her story. So no, come
All
on.
right, all right, all right, all right. Maybe I'm wrong. And
Okay. I love you,
so
man. I do. I love you, man. I love it. It's funny.
well, to balance out the John Wick alpha male thing, I wanted to
Okay.
throw this out. And I don't know if you
All
saw
right.
this, Cliff.
Mm.
According to one of the most popular accounts on X, Margot
We call it
Robbie
Twitter.
reve-
We call it Twitter still.
Margot
Thank you.
Robbie reveals her cinematic crush is Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. That's right. Margot Robbie's cinematic crush of all time is Aragorn from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Strider
well,
specifically.
that's true for all of us, though. That's true
Unfortunately
for all
for
of us.
Culture Crave, they're not really fans of the movies and Tolkien because they would know that the picture that they put on this post is of Elisar, not
Strider.
Strider.
That's right. Yeah,
So
they did.
Barbie loves Strider, and the sooner we can get a young Aragorn movie starring Margot Robbie, the more fun I'm gonna have. Cliff, could you see Margot Robbie as young Aragorn's mother?
Yes, I sure could. But I could, but you know, it might be that Margot is perhaps, I mean, I could see her doing some interesting things in Middle Earth, but honestly, I'd rather see Margot Robbie as an elf than as a mortal woman. Maybe that's just kind of, the type. You might get more mileage out of an actress that has hey, let's go back to Rosamund Pike again, shall we? Let's
I
just do
think
that.
she's committed
But
to another fantasy
she
franchise
is,
at this point.
she is. But when you're casting someone who'd be Aragorn's mom, you'd want that character to have some more specific grit, I guess, for lack of a better term. You would
I
want
get
that
it.
character to
Yeah, I
have,
get what you're saying.
yeah, yeah,
Could
because
she
they've
disappear
had to
if
survive and they've had to survive in the wilderness. They've had to survive by changing the name of that child several times so that people wouldn't come looking for the child to kill him. She had to find refuge with the elves. And boy, talk about a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. That would be Aragorn's mom. Really hard knocks. Yeah.
it's a role that could make an actor, an
Mm.
actress. So that's our show for today.
Yeah.
Wonderful
Yeah.
conversation about
Yeah.
Christopher Tolkien's legacy and where we go from here. Um,
Hmm.
it went longer and deeper than I expected. I hope it's been enlightening to a lot of you. I think it's an ongoing conversation as we talk about what's to come from
And
Middle
well,
Earth
also we're
in
we're going to put
movies
some
and
perspective on the fact that Simon Tolkien is, you know, the person who is driving the boat forward at this point. That's at least we've got that in front of us. And if we can deal with that, we might be able to understand some of these things better as they happen and as they develop.
right.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's fair. All right. What a lovely group of people with us in the chat today. Really lovely. Thank you for reminding me, Calabrian. Thank you. It was right on the tip of my tongue. I was just about to say that. But we have to have some of our friends, like Matt, Nerd of the Rings, and Christopher from the Wonder of Tolkien account. All these wonderful visitations down to Weta in New Zealand, and these people have been down there doing these great visits. We need to get them on the air so that they can share with us the energy and the feeling
Well,
of having been at these filming locations. We really want to have them join us
Cliff, you
soon.
won't
Soon.
you won't believe what just happened. As in the
What?
middle of the show, I got a video message from Nerd of the Rings, and we're going to end the
Wow.
show because Matt, Nerd of the Rings, is currently without signal
Oh,
at the
wow.
mountain of Edoras in New
No.
Zealand. So we have an
Wow.
exclusive video of Nerd of the Rings in at Edoras right now, and I'll play that as
Actually,
we end of the
the,
show.
the name of this physical location on the South Island is Mount Sunday. You can find it on the map that way. It's
And you can
not so far distant from Lake Tekapo, and it's called Mount Sunday. Look it up. Near Lake Tekapo, Mount Sunday on the South Island. That's where we're getting this video from. Let's roll that beautiful bean footage.
and as Cliff likes to say, Good night and good luck. Or better
Or
yet,
buenos noches y buena suerte. Now roll that beautiful bean footage.
Well,
Right
hello
there.
to the good folks of Torn Tuesday. I am coming to you from Middle Earth, New Zealand, specifically Edoras and the Golden Hall of Meduseld. There dwells Theoden, King of Rohan. This is just too much fun, guys. There are mountains like everywhere. Everywhere you look around this area with Edoras is mountains. It's amazing. I love this. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday, and yeah, have a good time on your stream.